This is Townsquare Sunday, the South Coast Bike Alliance sponsoring a meeting next Wednesday, January 9th, to unveil plans for a regional bikeway and trail initiative. Now, the meeting will take place at the Fairhaven Unitarian Universalist Church, 102 Green Street in Fairhaven, beginning at 7. The public is invited. Joining us today to promote that meeting, talk about it, and the bikeway plan in general is the president of the Alliance, Fairhaven Selectman Bob Espandola. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Jim.
Fairhaven has been a leader in bike paths, as far as I can tell. As long as I can remember, this bike path is here. For those of you who don't know, part of it runs right behind our building here on Sconnecut Neck Road, and it's a beautiful setting. People walk and people ride bikes on it. People run on it. You have a wonderful biking and walking path right through your town. It was here when you came onto the board, but certainly I'm sure you feel good about it.
Absolutely. It's one of the best assets the town has, and people use it all times of the year. It's a great thing for biking, walking, rollerblading, walking your pets. It's a great asset.
Now, has there been an issue connecting to Fairhaven, other communities connecting to Fairhaven? Has there been some things that have gotten in the way of that?
Yes, actually, it's the whole process is a very time-consuming, and it takes advocacy from people over many years to make it happen. There are a lot of permitting issues, and some of the segments are environmentally sensitive areas that they're going through. So there's a major expense associated with them. But the people who have been advocating for many years are starting to see some fruit being born, and Mattapoisett is due to open bids on January 8th for the next segment that would continue on into Mattapoisett, and that project would be following right along in the next year. And the Quikasham River Rail Trail was built, also a very environmentally sensitive area in Fall River, through many years of advocacy from Alfred J. Lima and others in the Fall River area. That's another beautiful trail. If people haven't seen it, I would encourage them to go out and see that. Hopefully connecting, locations like that with less expensive construction projects would be, the goal to connect the pieces together.
Now, the Quikasham Trail in Fall River, my wife and I have happened to walk it. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting place because it takes you right around the river, and you cross a road, and you're right behind the new Walmart. You keep going, and you're right behind the Meditech office, mm-hmm. Meditech office building, and then the UMass, I forget what they call it now, but the Commerce Building there.
Right.
And so it's a beautiful walk, and it's a well-kept area, and to continue that in all communities is really be a great thing. I understand Westport, though, is not as accommodating about this as perhaps some other communities.
Well, they have, in the past, it's part of what our alliance does is try to bring the various advocates together. So we have members from Westport and Dartmouth and, New Bedford, Marion, Mattapoisett, and Fairhaven. We're very strong in the alliance. We're looking for more representation further west towards, Somerset and Swansea. But there's been a lot going on, and we coordinate things together. And what's been happening lately is the communities have been advocating for CPA funds, so community preservation funds for doing projects. So that's an example right there. Alfred Lima, who's been the major advocate behind the Quikasham River Rail Trail, has submitted for $125,000 for an extension of that, a short extension that would tie into Westport. So there's a lot of discussion going on there in Westport also about things like the, Whites of Westport, the LaFrance family have been very supportive of our efforts as an alliance, and they are actually considering plans to expand their operations there in that Westport area. And we've been talking to them about, the interface between, existing trails and potentially new trails, crossing of Sanford Road over Route 6, which is something that would be very helpful. But our goal is to connect all these. And there are a couple other, if you think about the Harbor Walk and the Cove Walk now that have been built in the city, and the city's efforts on the Blue Lane These are all things that are, in and of themselves, tremendous, concepts, and we're trying to find ways to tie them all together.
Well, that would be wonderful. I know the state at one time was very encouraging of all of this. Was at the forefront of talking about bike trails and bike paths and having a regional bike path. Are they still involved somewhat, or is it being left mostly to local communities?
No, the process that is certainly a state-funded program. So, the work that's going on in Mattapoisett through the Mass DOT, the state's definitely heavily involved in getting these projects to move forward. It's just more difficult than it used to be. The funding is more difficult to get, and as you mentioned, time. It's difficult to keep people engaged when it takes so long for something to develop.
This is years.
And yes, so in our own organization, we've seen people come and go who just didn't have the patience. We've had others that have stayed with us through the years. But this is what's interesting about the connection to Craig Della Penna. Craig was a speaker at one of our summits. So every spring we have a summit where we bring people together and talk about these issues. And he attended and was a keynote at our summit about 5 years ago when we were out at the UMass Law School in Dartmouth. And he's a great speaker, so I really encourage people to come out and hear him talk. But he's a tremendous advocate for rail trails. And I ran into him at a Mass Bike, it's a Massachusetts biking organization. They had a summit of their own last winter, or 2 winters ago. And I ran into him there, and I told him, I said, it's a little difficult to keep people engaged, and we're trying to find ways because it takes so long and these projects are so expensive. So he recommended that we get more involved in smaller scale projects that could be off-road trail type projects that people can still pass on a bicycle, and the funding is much easier to come by. There are other resources like the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and so we've kind of tried in a parallel path to go after those kind of funds. And our first effort there was we got a grant from the DCR for an education series of workshops. So we've held now 4 in the past year workshops that were free to people to come. It was a $6,800 grant. We had a 20% match, so we had our own fundraising efforts to match that. And we hosted people that came in and learned how to do trail building. And what we're finding is we're trying to get ourselves to where we can appeal to people of all different varieties who want to do outdoor recreational, things like, off-road bicycling. People do trail running through the trails on foot. And we're trying to connect existing paved pathways to resources in our region. One example of that, in Fairhaven, like you said, we're blessed to have this bike path, but a few years ago, the town appropriated funds, about $200,000, with a match of a similar amount of money from Mattapoisett, and a major match from Buzzards Bay Coalition of about $5.6 million for about a $6 million project that preserved land in the Mattapoisett and Fairhaven area. And now people can ride the bike path, and I've seen this myself. I've done it myself, but I've seen people, a family, ride their bicycles down to a bike rack that's right along the trailhead, get off their bikes, and then take a hike down to the water in Shaw's Cove. It's a beautiful thing to see those, things tied together. So we've expanded our role from just thinking about a 50 or 60 mile straight stretch of railroad rail bed that gets converted to bicycling, paved roadway, to finding other ways we can connect through Dartmouth and South Dartmouth to the Harbor Walk, for example. And so we're trying to map out ways to connect everything together.
Why the meeting on Wednesday?
So this is, the Universal, the Unitarian Universalists is the men's group at the church that came up with this idea. And the link really is Ken Patel, who is a member of that group, and he was one of the advocates of the Fairhaven Bikeway way back when. He was one of the principals involved in that. And Craig Della Penna actually traces back all the way to that time period with Fairhaven. He was a key advocate at that time as well. Ken was a member of the Fairhaven Bikeway Committee in the past, and also the South Coast Bikeway. So he kind of links all these things together. They, as part of their mission, they try to promote environmental stewardship. So they saw this as a means to do that, and they reached out to us to see if we would like to co-sponsor. And we're anytime you can get Craig to speak in our area, we're absolutely, excited about that.
You're listening to Townsquare Sunday. I'm Jim Phillips, and my guest is Bob Espandola, a member of the Fairhaven Board of Selectmen and president of the South Coast Bikeway Alliance. I understand that Wednesday's meeting will include an update on the planned South Coast Bikeway.
That's correct.
I think a young lady from Mattapoisett is going to be presenting that. Is that right?
Yes, Bonnie D'Souza, who was recognized as the Mattapoisett Woman of the Year this year for all her efforts in this area. She's been a tremendous asset to our alliance and done tremendous work in Mattapoisett. And she's one of those stalwarts that have just stayed with and advocated for this over years and years and years. So we owe a lot of gratitude to Bonnie for her efforts to bring things to the point where they are right now in Mattapoisett, where they're actually looking to build this next phase. And so we'll hear about that. Also, Marion has gone through a 25% stage with DOT with their planning efforts, and they're hopeful to get onto the transportation plan for funding in 2020, 2021 timeframe. And they're, the communities of Dartmouth, Westport, and the city of New Bedford have all applied for $10,000 each of CPA funding, which the South Coast Bikeway Alliance will then work to advocate for a DCR grant to match that and do a feasibility study that would be to run a 3.7-mile trail through the town of Dartmouth connecting Fall River to New Bedford. So we're excited about that.
For Bob Espandola now, why is this important for the South Coast?
I think we can point to three things that we believe are really important in this area. So, health, the environment, and the economy. Those are three major factors that are well documented, and why bicycling and walking and hiking and jogging, all those things that we do on these paths that once they're built are open and free to anyone, and that's a key. You don't need a membership. You don't need the funds to go and get a membership somewhere to join a health facility. And just in the newspaper this morning, there was an article about that since the turn of the century, so in just 19 years, the average male has increased their weight by about 9 pounds, and the average female by about 7 pounds. So, we're going in the wrong direction in that area, and certainly from a health standpoint, we feel it's really important to our region to have these kind of assets that in other parts of the country and other parts of the world they do have. And then from an environmental standpoint, it's, they say that about 50% of trips that people take on a daily basis are less than 3 miles. So if you can get, I see people walking down the bike path with small bags of groceries. They're choosing to do that instead of getting their car. I see people on their bicycles with racks where they have groceries. So people are doing that, and the more we can promote that, the better. And there are many studies that have shown the economic force behind developing these bikeways and what they bring.
It's a quality of life issue.
It's absolutely.
And people who are looking at this area to relocate a business, they want those kinds of amenities around.
Absolutely.
There's no question about it.
It's been well documented that homes along the bikeways have increased in value. And Craig himself, Craig Della Penna, is a realtor. He buys properties along bikeways and develops them into bed and breakfast. So he's well aware. Again, Wednesday night, January 7th, 7 p.m., First Unitarian Universalist Church on Green Street in Fairhaven. The public is invited. Is there a website people can go to? Yes, southcoastbikeway.com. southcoastbikeway.com, and you can register there. My thanks to Fairhaven Selectman Bob Espandola, president of the South Coast Bikeway Alliance. Thanks for coming in. Good luck, Bob. You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me. That's it for Townsquare Sunday this week. Thanks for tuning in. Also thanks to production director Jason Kent and digital editor Casey Sylvia for their help in getting the program on the air and on the web. I'm Jim Phillips. Have a great week and a wonderful Sunday.